the pan-European peace order or the federal peace order, I mean, the thing we are thinking about since long. It's not the first time that we are thinking about it. Who recalled it? You recalled it, somebody recalled it, but we had Helsinki, we had OECD, we had Charter of Paris, we had the process of 1990, we had the wall coming down, we had Gorbachev more or less surrendering the Soviet Union, we had a peaceful build down of the Warsaw Pact, we had the NATO aggression. I mean, there was really a missed opportunity in '89. And I think we should commemorate, or also, try to have, I tried to do this in my book, to say like, there's really a reflection in Europe we need to do, that we missed the '89 moment. We missed the '89 moment, yeah. We missed it as a peaceful moment. Backing down, we were full of, the end of history. Everybody's becoming liberal democratic now, and we won history, and so. And there was something profoundly missing about also what the Soviet Union had achieved, or socialism. I know there's Stalin, and it always comes like, are you not considering the Gulag, and are you not considering Archipel Gulag and all of this? But in essence, I mean, the Soviet Union did a lot for feminism, did a lot for poor countries, did a lot for alphabetization, did a lot for liberational movements, and I think there is some part of the history of the last century that needs to be literally rewritten, yeah. And so there's a huge task, because I come from a university. I know what the textbooks are, the textbooks for students, the textbooks for student pupils. So if we sort of re-engage in deconstructing, and I said, Bernard, I said it, you said it in your video, I answered on this, but I think there is really a huge task, which is deconstructing 80 years of history in the past century, because I think I end up in your talk saying that 1945 and 2025 is 80 years. Something is closing now. It's pretty evident that we went sort of so far, and that what we did, whatever we did, NATO, EU, blah, 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 that order is coming to an end. We all can sense it. We do not know what comes now. We have perhaps the chance to shape something, or to forge something, or to do something new with new wordings. Yeah, that's why we are here actually. But it all needs to be shaped, constructed, and so on and so forth. So I just give some thoughts. Nothing is apodictic. All is for discussion. Yeah, I think it's the moment of open history, which are jewelry moments of history. Yeah, because history was stuck for so long, 49, 89, then opened again, then we made it stuck again, and now it's open again in some way. And so it's a precious moment in time to have an open moment of history, because that's the only moment where you can change things. Yeah. Sorry? The enter button. The enter button. Okay. I come up with 3 maps that I have in my new book, and the idea in the 3rd chapter, and I have them just to get people think, because if we talk about, and that's Zeitenwenden is the title of my new book. Zeitenwenden, when times are changing, is actually a moment when maps are changing. So when you are basically drawing new Atlanten, new cards, yeah. So that's what we see here. I mean, all this sort of thing is 1914, 1918, whatever imperial, colonial, British, whatever thing. And whatever that thing made, it made a lot of war. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, so when you start to redraw maps, then you're changing time. Yeah, and I just put 3 maps into my new book to make people just first to get over the point that something is for eternity. Yeah. And in my book, I write, even the Federal Republic perhaps may not be for eternity, so I will probably be killed again in publicity, but, whatever, yeah? So, because we have Eastern Germans starting now thinking, okay, leave us alone with the Western part, we want the Imperial Schutzwall back, the Western, whatever. So, I found this in the internet before Trump, and for whatever reason, I picked that out. I fished it out of the internet, because I felt like, what the fuck is this? I mean, who is doing a circle here with Argentina? And then, I mean, it was quite weird. And then came and there was not much description. You can buy my book, Michael, then you have it. It's out in 1 week only. And the thing is that the only thing you can apply, because it's not even NATO, yeah, because Australia is not NATO associated, so you don't find a sort of thing here, yeah. The only thing you may find is that these are the countries defending the so-called rule-based order, which is this whatever acronym, because we don't speak about UN Charter any longer, because we are violating UN Charter as we can, so we needed a new invention of a new word, and we call it rule-based order. So that's the only thought I can think. But what's interesting is then came Trump. And then Trump said, let me take Greenland and Canada. And that was the moment I felt, oh, I saw a map in the internet before. Well, can I look at my map? And I said, okay, now I have Trump and Canada and Greenland, and and so my map started to be senseful, yeah. And then I remember, it's like, when you have an associative mind like me, because I'm not into details, I'm not into academic research, but I'm very associative. And I remember that in 2001, I was sitting in a conference in the Hamptons in New York at a Chinese European American conference with somebody, and I remember the name Richard Rosenkrantz. And Richard Rosenkrantz by then was professor of political science in Berkeley. And by then, I was invited, Bertelsmann Foundation. Yeah, I was very young. I was very proud to be at the Hamptons with all these people. He said, because China was about to join WTO, so the trade union, he said, that's too big. We will need to merge. The US and EU will need to merge because we need to cope with China. And I remember literally, it was in 2001, I said, no, that's not working, because you have the dollar, we do the euro. So if we are merging into a country, two currencies, that doesn't work. And I picked a fight with Mr. Rosenkrantz. I think I was 32 or something, or 34. And he was a big professor. And then I pulled out this article again, because then later he would write an article or two articles, one in 2005, another in 2010, where he argued this again, sort of, we need to have a state, yeah? And it comes to, in a way, what you said about the ruling class, because that is the engagement of all this Bilderberg, Gates, whatever, World the Economic Forum. By the way, I was twice in Davos, yeah? I mean, if you are invited like me the only thing you see is all these ruling class and the prostitutes, basically. That's what you see. I mean, if not much more. I mean, they are not interesting discussions. That's, I think, what I'm going to say. But there's a lot of good food and a lot of champagne and a lot of caviar and a lot of whatever there is. Yeah, you feel like, what is going on here? So, because sometimes they invite critical minds to showcase, I was with Adam Tooze, yeah? I was with Adam Tooze, and I was with essentially with Ivan Krastev, who's not a silly guy. I mean, he's a Bulgarian liberal thinker, but he's very smart. So Ivan and Adam and I, we had a panel, and basically saying on that panel, the EU is the problem. And I guess they invited us to showcase that they have open discussion, whatever, yeah? So what I'm saying is, this card is here, and Rosenkrantz argued there should be a state. And now, 20 years later, Trump comes, and everybody is arguing, oh, the US and Europe is split, and now Europe is alone, and we need to do 5% NATO goal, and we need to do that war against Russia, and we need to do it instead of the US, because bullshitting Trump is moving out and doing the wrong politics. Because what we do have now, and I call this in my new book, a transatlantic civic war, which is that half of the American elites are against Trump, but half of the Europeans are in favor of Trump. And it's totally crossed over, yeah, because we have European the half of Europeans, but also of European elites. The populist elites are in favor of Trump, and half of the Americans are against Trump, and half of the European elites are also against Trump. So it's a European civic war along the lines of liberalism and populism that has basically nothing to do with the US against Europe. But in the current discourse now, the overarching theme is Trump is leaving Europe alone, and Europe needs to step in, and we are now the flambeau of liberty, and we now need to do the war against Russia, and therefore we need to rearm Europe, but also to have 5% of NATO, and so to fulfill the American geostrategic interests. It's like as if a child, sort of the US-EU as a childish relation, yeah, and the child now says, I'm grown, and I can also do war. Yeah, this sort of childish, I also can do war thing that Europe is now playing. Yeah, and then I posed the question: is this the right analysis? Because that's the overarching theme we have now in the press. And I basically dispute the analysis. I said, perhaps there's a different plan behind, because everybody's saying Trump is totally erratic, but perhaps he has a plan. And perhaps all this trade business and everything is, which by the way is a left agenda, yeah, doing non-financial transactions and reducing trade, bringing back wealth, bringing back people, bringing back jobs, is a left agenda. It's not a right agenda. I mean, can we just make that clear? So, and then in my book, because it's a free-floating book, it's free thinking, and I hope Academia Libera will defend that book with me, because I'm just saying perhaps Trump has a plan, and the plan is not that Europe goes against Russia, but the plan is to do a state. And perhaps Trump is wise enough, I mean that Rosenkranz idea, and perhaps Trump is wise enough to understand that the US alone cannot survive, because they don't have industries, they don't have machineries, they have nothing. They don't have Louis Vuitton for the chicaria in New York, they don't have champagne, good cheese, they have nothing, yeah? So I'm just discussing whether the liberal ruling class in that extent, probably not the populist parties, yeah, but that there might be an underlying theme that what we are experiencing, because history is open and we don't know what is coming out of it, the sort of hidden agenda is a different agenda than what we think the agenda is. Okay, for discussion. Yeah. But if we were to merger, as Rosenkranz called it, we would be 900 million people, not even China, not even India, but the two biggest important economies, stock market, Frankfurt, London, New York. So if the BRIC issue, the last chart of peace, is the issue, yeah, then the merger at least would be a step to hold against BRIC, if that is the war line of the 21st century. Yeah, so that's just the essence of that. Okay, so then the other map you find in the internet is this, because this sort of heartland theory, hijack Russia, put it into pieces, I mean, this regime change operation Ukraine, I mean, everything Ukraine stands for. I think I don't go deep into the heartland theory, 1904, Mackinder, and then obviously the UK failed, but then it went to Brzezinski, and then Brzezinski sketched it out, and then basically we do all this NATO enlargement, and then Georgia, you mentioned it, and then Ukraine and NATO membership, and eating ever more into the Caucasian sort of thing, because the resources are here, and so you need to deconstruct Russia, and then perhaps the Chinese can take some parts of it, and the other pieces are taken by the West and whatever. Yeah. So it's just a map which is in the internet. And I thought, like, it's interesting that these maps are in the internet because somebody is designing them. I didn't even invent it, It's just like you Google it a little bit, sort of, and then you get this. And I thought, okay, you get one map with the circle and the other is this. So I have a third map in my book on the Proche-Orient, on the Arab world, which I don't go here, but because these are of interest for us. So, because then the question is, what does Europe in this? I mean, with the two maps, the two sort of things, and what Europe in there? So that is my beloved Europe. And I always say, it's Mrs. Europe. She's a princess. She's beautiful. And it's important that she's a woman, a princess, and beautiful. Mrs. Europe is not Brussels, she's not a banking union, she's not warfare, she's just a woman, she's a princess, and she's beautiful. So I think there's some cultural sort of thing that we need to capture what we are. It's the most old map we can find from Europe, 1534. So the map will have 500 years in 2034. And the next years of my life, which is something like 10 years from now, I will dedicate to make the celebration, 500-year celebration of this woman called Europe, to make her beautiful and to find her ancestries and to just think about what that map wanted to tell us, because the map is not trivial. 1534 is in the midst of the split of the church between Catholic and Protestant. So Europe was in search for some imago of unity, yeah, because what she holds here is the ball of Res Publica Christiana, res publica Christiana, yeah, the common good of the common good, the public being of the Christianity. So Christianity is splitting, already split in Rome and Byzance, but now splitting into Protestant and Catholics. Res publica is a very important term. Keep that in mind, because res publica is a political order built around public goods, not about sovereign capital, but about public goods. The republic has a very different meaning than sovereign state or sovereign capital. And all the illusions that people by then couldn't read, but you see here the big fleuve, and that is obviously Donau, Danube, and all the 10 countries, all the people are around Danube. But people by then thought about Garten Eden and der Mutterfluss, the mother Fluss, the mother, der Mutterfluss from Garten Eden, because people needed imagos that they would be able to tap on. So I do not want to stay long here, but 2 or 3 things. What I read in the map and what I put in the book, what I read in the map for discussion, yeah? But I basically said sort of, can we say, where is she looking to? And she's basically looking to the Arab world, Orient, Occident, yeah? I mean, she has not her head twisted to look to Washington, right? It's very important. I mean, she would need to be like this to look to New York and to Washington, yeah? There is an Occident-Orient sort of mirroring in terms of culture in that map, and I think we need to find this back, because I make a long argument in the book that basically it's liberalism and the American ruling class that destroyed European societies, and the reaction is populism, but that also destroyed the Arab societies, and the reaction is jihadism. Yeah, so that populism and jihadism are related, and they are also reciprocally connected, because then jihadism creates refugees, and the refugees does populism, and so we have a negative sort of yo-yo of reciprocity between jihadism and populism, but both are at origins there's liberalism. Yeah, so she looks here. So there's something for me to clarify the relationship between Orient and Occident. Yeah, and what we do with the Arab world, and then that gets really interesting in terms of Israel, Iran, and the US interferences there. But she stands with her feet on a Russian soil. Russia is here, Moscow is in, Lithuania. So, I mean, she stands on Russian soil, is looking to the Orient, and holds an apple of the Republic in her hands. I think these are 3 features out of which a peace order for Europe could be developed. What is in there, le manteau, the mantle, the coat, all the peoples, yeah, Russia, Lithuania, Polonia, Hungary, Albania, Greca, they are all in, yeah. Gallia is the breast, the French, the Germans are the heart. Quite interesting. To be short, there is no notion of nation state. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge discussion about what the nation state is, and the sovereign nation state that we invented after 1789 French Revolution. Yeah, so first, I think this map shows us that all the Carta of Paris, OECD, federal ideas of a European security architecture that goes from here to here, yeah, are the right ideas. I mean, all the ideas we had already, and we had them already, yeah, like in OECD, like in Helsinki basket, and so that we need a federal structure putting us together with a common roof. In this sense, the roof is le manteau, but something like a common roof as a security architecture, but many federations below, yeah. And if we go that, then the real problem is, and I discussed this with Daria the other day, is really this notion of the nation state and the sovereign nation state. I argue that's too complicated to make it here in long, but that this is an aberration of terminology, and that Europe comes from the Republic, and that the Republic is a very different notion than a state. Jean Baudin, Les Civils de la République. So if you come from the Republic, origin and identity don't matter. The Republic is submission under same law. It's a very different approach. You have now historians, couple of historians, Koselleck, some others, who basically say that the fabrics of the power structure of Europe always has been translatio imperii, so translation of empire empowerment, yeah, translatio imperii, coming from the Caesaropapismus, so that we had wandering kingdoms, you know, like Habsburger, like Charles V, so that the power would go from Charlemagne to Charles V to the Habsburg, but the power would never be stable in an imperial sort of Europe. But the specificity from Europe was that power would be walking or wandering, yeah, in translatio imperio style. And that below that roof of translatio imperii, a very thin layer of sort of unity, yeah, you had basically multi-ethnic and multi-religious entities all over the place. I mean, towns like Trieste or towns like Vienna or towns like Prague always were multi-ethnic and multi-religious. Prague was not the national Czech town, but Prague was the Jews there, the Bohemians here, the Germans there. And so was Trieste, and so was most of the European towns. If you look deeper into all this, you know, European people, yeah, you find in today's European nation states everywhere minorities from another nation state. I mean, Latvia, Estonia, all these, you know, Baltic states are half full of Russians. Ukraine has been into Habsburger, and Crimea was always independent. Even Rhineland wanted to be separated in 24. Yeah, had Adenauer taken a different decision, perhaps I would be now emerging of an independent Rhineland. Yeah, which, you know, could be nice. So Saarland, Elsass, Schlesien. So what I'm saying is we do have a federal structure throughout Europe, and it's not national homogeneous. You have the Romanians in Hungary and the Hungarians in Romania and the Romanians in Moldavia, and you have the Slovenes in Austria and the Italians in Tyrol and the Austrians in Tyrol and the Basque in Spain and in France, and always a national border is cross-cutting the real people in a way. Yeah, I mean, there is a relationship between regionalism and that national border stuff. And then you remember First World War, where we fought for the regions. I mean, the First World War was essentially whether Alsace is German or French, Schlesien is German or Polish, or Eupen-Malmedy is German or Belgian, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So the idea for the European peace order, for me, therefore, is very clear. We need to think about a regional structure, and we need to think about a federal structure. Federal and regional structure are the two buzzwords. Covered, that would be the idea of translatio imperii and the apple, covered by a whatever European Republican roof that sends a slim layer, a very slim layer of, you know, common coverage like this manteau, but not a strong sort of national sovereign power. And that might be the basis for an architecture of peace for the whole continent together with Russia. So my preferred book on this is a book from Hannah Arendt, Politische Grammatik des Gründens. And Hannah Arendt wrote this in, I don't know, 40-something or early 50. You know, she studied a lot of Camus and, you know, the anti-fascist movements with a couple of French authors like Simone Weil. And le mot d'ordre, c'était libérer et fédérer. Libérer et fédérer. Free up yourself from whatever fascist government and federate the small unities. So it was all about small unities that are federated, but not federated in the EU structure by nation states and so on and so forth, but by more or less autonomous structures that federate. That's text work, you know, I know, but I mean, there's a lot of political theory behind. I do not want to go too deep into this, but there were political movements around, even Albert Camus and all those people, you know, this libéré, fédéré, small entities. And it was not, I mean, if you read these texts, in none of these texts is the nation state or is sovereignty. It's just libéré, fédéré. Yeah? And at some moment, Hannah Arendt says, and I like this definition, she says, if man wants to be free, it's precisely sovereignty that he will need to renounce. Why? Because nobody is autonomous, can't live alone. So Interesse is what is between you and me and you and me. So 50% collectivity, 50% individual, and we need to find the room, the space between Interesse, your Interesse, me Interesse. So sovereignty is always ambiguous. That is that nobody rules about me, but sovereignty pretends that somebody, and political body or whatever people rule about others. So the ambivalence, yeah? And so she says sovereignty is cross-cutting with plurality. And out of this, she makes sovereignty is the wrong notion, libéré and fédéré. So Peter over lunch said we need to find new words. I agree. We need to find libéré, fédéré, and republic, yeah? And not national sovereignty. I think it's like liberal democracy. It's ill-framed concepts. On liberal democracy, I have a whole chapter in my new book. Well, this is totally ill-framed, like, everyone wants to save democracy. I mean, completely absurd. So I offer fédéré and republic as, and translatio imperii as sort of the fabrics, the real fabrics of Europe since centuries, to be refound in a new order for the 21st century. Getting ever more questions about what are we really going to do with this offer of citizens diplomacy, that citizens go to Russia and to Kiev and feel, oh my gosh, die Geister, die ich rief, werde ich nicht mehr wieder los. This is der Hexenmeister by Goethe. So, but then to just give me a little bit of ground, I remembered that in 46 in September, after World War II, there were a conference in Switzerland, Hertenstein, small Smith village, where people, citizens from 14 European countries, including Russians, because it was clear that we do the Europe with Russians, yeah, gathered and wrote a program, Hertensteiner Programm, 12 points. So you find this in the internet on Wikipedia. It's very easy to find. For the German speaking, I have the 12 points here. But in essence, it's precisely what Hannah Arendt wrote. Libéré et fédéré. What we need on the continent is small unities which are more or less auto-federating with citizen council, auto-determinating themselves. Räterepublik was the Bolshevik word, yeah. So it's also wrong to say that Hannah Arendt is a liberal thinker. Actually, she's for the Räterepublik, yeah. But this is not wanted to, but so. And then what they wanted to do, I will not read the 12 points, you can find them. But by then, the United Nations were also in preparation, yeah, and they wanted to have a sort of a Weltbund, ein Weltbund der Völker, yeah, so ein Weltbund der Völker. And the Hertenstein people wanted, that is the stone, when all this took place, what they wanted is to build a political body of Europe, a European Union, but not the EU that we have now, but a political union that is independent, that is able to protect the European people in their specificity, and that as a political body, as an integrated political body, is part of a Weltbund der Völker. Yeah? So that was the idea. And the only idea I had when, hanging around with the question of Ludovic and what we do, I said, okay, in 46 they did this. Perhaps we can just go back to our ancestors and look, what did they want? Why did they write down this? Is this still up to date? Shall we take it? Can we modify it? Can we work from there? Can we retrace the way they wanted this and then came out a sort of beast called European Union, which is basically the opposite of what they wanted, yeah? So just as a starting point, and then I coined the idea that with the money we now have and the 60,000 people and the project which is falling from heaven, we could envisage a sort of Hertenstein 2.0 conference in 2026 in September, so 1 year from now. And that would leave us some time to do some reflection, intellectual reflection, how to build Europe, on which basis, on which sort of political theory, background, Hannah Arendt, the whole thing. So all this is for discussion, and that's my basically contribution for thought, for free thought, for very free thought today. Ah, yeah.